Oh, buddy, that was maybe one of the best episodes of the challenge ever. Maybe in the conversation.
You know me. I don't like making proclamations about like best ever because I feel there's always a recency bias. But I will say, this episode was amazing. It was so good. It was definitely the best episode in a very long time. It had a bit of everything. It had some drama. Obviously, it had a club scene, which has a soft spot. I have a soft spot for the club scenes.
Yep.
There were challenges. There was a good elimination. There was a great heel turn. There was a fight. All over it. Loved it all. I'm here for it. Great episode of the challenge. If I was to show somebody an episode of the Challenge Vendettas or just a challenge brand to be like, this is what the show is about, last night's episode would be that. So good.
Yeah. Just like last night's episode of the challenge, we've got everything. I'm John Chidley Hill.
And as always, I am Sheldon Alexander, who also can only be described as Nirvana.
And this is You Killed It, the podcast about the challenge. And man, I was very hyped about this episode. We actually texted about this episode in advance, which I think long-time listeners of You Killed It know. We kind of maintain radio silence on Mondays and Tuesdays because we don't want to bias each other.
It's true.
We try to save it all for the recording. Before we dig into this episode, though, we do have to touch on just a little nugget of information that we got.
Oh, I forgot about this.
For listeners. Yeah, we can't let this slide.
True.
And that was last episode of You Killed It, and I guess 2 episodes ago of the challenge. Mm-hmm. Kailah beat Marie in competition, and we didn't speculate as to the whys or wherefores, but we're like, TJ basically called Marie a quitter. He did call her a quitter.
He did.
Marie texted us to tell us that she purposely, she took a dive in the competition.
Yeah.
Because she knew that her days were numbered, that her girl, Kailah, had a better chance of going all the way and winning. So basically, she stepped aside.
Yeah.
So we needed to pass that on to our faithful listeners. A little insight behind the scenes.
Yes, a little info behind the scenes. And I mean, when we discussed her performance, and we did go back and forth a little bit on what did happen. And I think at one point we did discuss, if you're inside that basket and you obviously hear that your opponent got out, I was wondering, okay, if you hear that she already got out and you're not even close, at that point you're just kind of like, you know what I mean? And you're just kind of you're defeated, regardless of whether you want to be or not. So it kind of made sense to hear that afterwards. But the other thing that's kind of cool, from our side is, it's good to hear that kind of information, because the same way that we enjoy, reading online comments and stuff, from whether it's Reddit, whether it's Facebook, on Twitter, we appreciate all those comments. As cool as it is to hear from the fans, obviously it's just as cool, if not cooler, to hear from the people actually involved, to get insights, to see where we were wrong, see where we were right, give us a little inside info when need be. And I think that was pretty cool information to find out. And obviously we make sure that we're able to pass it along before we pass it along. And she was like, no, this is part of their plan, right? Suicide Squad plan. Who she said that she was a realist, right? She knows that her girl Kailah has a better chance of going all the way than she does, and so why even put any stresses on Kailah in that elimination? Let her continue her march to hopefully the final.
And Marie pointed out that in that episode of the challenge that you can see that the fix is in when there's that scene when they're talking in the bathroom and Kailah says, "It just sucks that I'm going to be alone here."
Yes.
That was after them being like, Marie being like, "I'm going to take the dive."
Yeah.
And so that's why Kailah, she wasn't being arrogant. She wasn't like, oh, like it's a sure thing that I'm going to rock Marie. She was saying, Marie, you're going to be gone, and that sucks.
Yeah. Super interesting. But, I mean, this season, I've been talking to some of my friends about this, John, and I'd like to get your thoughts on this, because it sort of seemed like this season was, I don't want to say dragging, but because there was stuff happening, but I don't know if it was always on, if it was always hitting, let's say, an 8 on the Richter scale, right?
Mm-hmm.
That was until this episode. If anyone was complaining about what was going on in this season or it dragging, they fit everything in. And they teed us up at the end of last episode where we got this Johnny Bananas and Devin trash talk going strong. And I mean, we ended our last episode discussing this and kind of what was going to happen if we thought that, Johnny Bananas was going to get thrown in. And boy, did he get thrown in. Now, I want to start by asking you something here. We obviously know...
Lay it on me.
We know the Troika was Tony, Zach, and Kailah, right?
Yeah.
We've been hearing this whole thing about how Tony considers Bananas a big brother. He called him the MJ to his Scotty. Basically called him the peanut butter to his jelly. So the way that things are going, who did you think they were going to put up? Like, we saw them have their Troika meeting, and it kind of seemed like Zach. To me, what I was looking at was Zach kind of looked like he was playing this perfectly. I know Tony's the one that made the big move, but to me, Zach was like kind of playing it back as if he was in on the move, but he's trying to make it seem like he didn't know about it. And I'm talking about from the Troika all the way to the very end of the episode where we see him throw in Johnny Bananas. What did you think of how Zach was playing this? Because Kailah was open about what she was doing. Tony was kind of like leaning towards it, right? Zach, calm and cool in the background. What do you think of how the whole Troika's dynamic worked?
I think that throughout the house, the writing was on the wall.
Okay.
Because you're gonna catch slivers of conversation. You're gonna catch just like a vibe, and especially with Devin and Johnny Bananas, very vocal back and forth.
Yeah.
But you didn't hear anyone defending Johnny Bananas or being like, no, there's no way we can send him in.
True.
Right? It seems like the only one who didn't think he was going to get put up was Johnny Bananas himself.
So that was the interesting part to me as well. Because, okay, so they make their decision, right? They end up putting in, who was it? Nelson. They end up putting in Nelson, Leroy, and Bananas, right? And after they're done, they end up telling Bananas, oh, don't worry, you're not going in. Like, whatever, it's no big deal. And Bananas, I mean, he can't explode, because if he explodes, then he's definitely going in. But he couldn't have been buying that he was a pawn, right? Like, Johnny Bananas doesn't get used as a pawn. If you're on the voting block, you're going in, right? Like, shouldn't he have known that?
Oh, I think he did. Because when Zach told him, like, you're not going up, and then he, like, went to talk to Tony to be like, hey, I'm not going up, right? I think he knew what was coming. On some level, like, maybe, like, on a subconscious level.
Yeah.
I think he knew it was coming. And I think, to get back to your question about Zach, I think that Zach, like everyone else, saw the writing on the wall, but was only too willing to let Tony fall on the sword. Because if you're in Zach's position and you think that Tony is going to A, push for Johnny Bananas to be nominated, B, actually vote him in, why would you say Johnny Bananas' name? Right? Like, if because that way, let's say Johnny Bananas does beat Devin.
Yeah.
Spoiler, everyone. Then Johnny Bananas doesn't come back pissed at you. But if he gets eliminated, all the better for you. Like, Zach has to know that, like, to win, Johnny Bananas has to go.
For sure. I also think, too, that, like, Tony, the way that Tony's been playing this season, Tony is really he's riding high this season, right? Like, he came in focused, but not only did he come in focused, but he's acting accordingly, right? Like, he's appeared to come in focus the past few seasons, but his game didn't really match his mindset, right? And this season, I think, has been a little bit different. And they tweeted out from, I think it was a challenge account, or maybe it was Tony tweeted it out. But if you remember from last year's, like, 10-episode finale that they had, right? Do you remember that from, was it the Dirty 30? Yeah. The Dirty 30, like, had such a long finale. But in one of those episodes, there was a scene where they showed all the people in a bar afterwards, right? I guess it was maybe like the rap party. I don't know if that's exactly what it was. But anyways, there's a scene where you see Devin, Tony, and Tony's girlfriend, and they're sitting at a table, right? And Tony says that, you know, oh, well, we just finished the finale, and everyone was talking about Nelson, or not Nelson. Everyone was dissing Corey, right? Like, saying how stupid Corey was because he called out Bananas from the beginning and tried to go at him. And Tony was like, no, I don't think he's stupid. I think he's smart. He's a trailblazer. Those guys are in their 30s. We're in our 20s. It might be time to flip things around. And Devin's like, Devin's shaking his head like he agrees. And Tony's like, yeah, we should do this. And so Tony had this in his mind with Devin from a while. And I think the best part of all this was they kept this on the low. They kept this under wraps until they got their opportunity to try to flip the house, right? And not even flip the house. I think almost like flip the brand, right? Because it's bigger than that, right? You're like flipping the old guard. And so, again, Tony was just waiting. And maybe in normal seasons, it might have been a little early to take your shot at Bananas. But to go off what you just said, even if you miss, right? And let's say Bananas did beat Devin and he comes back in the house, Bananas still doesn't have numbers, right? So it doesn't really matter. Like, he would literally have to be winning challenges himself or be on the winning team and for some reason think that someone's going to put him in the troika, which I don't know why you would do that, right? Do you know what I mean? Like, he would need to have someone else that he's playing the game with, and I don't know if those people exist in the house anymore. So what I'm saying is I just think that this was genius and it was thought of from a while ago, and shouts to the execution of it all, but just the way that they were able to keep it under wraps and like play it calm and cool, you know, Tony did a really good job of that, and you got to give him a lot of credit for that.
Well, I also think we need to talk about the legend of Johnny Bananas.
Okay.
And Johnny Bananas' strategy in the game. Johnny Bananas' entire strategy, well, not his entire strategy, but a big part of it is keeping himself out of eliminations.
Yeah.
Because Johnny is low-key not great at one-on-one eliminations. Like, let me put it this way. What is the most famous moment in challenge history? Johnny Bananas is part of it.
Oh, for sure. It's him losing to CT.
Yeah, it's the Johnny Bananas backpack.
Yeah.
And, you know, technically, he's not losing to CT in that clip. He's losing to Tyler.
True.
Because the event was to see who could last longest against CT, and Johnny lasted, like 15 seconds?
Exactly.
Whereas Tyler lasted like 45 minutes.
Yeah.
Or something ridiculous. But Johnny doesn't usually do well in eliminations. His very first season, he was pitted against Tyler as a rookie, got the boot on like his first episode.
Yep.
In Battle of the X's, I guess it was 2 or 3, the one where there was the shadow bracket and he came back in.
I don't even remember which one that is. Wow, that's taking it back. That's taking it back. But yeah,
and Nani was his partner. He got eliminated, and he only managed to come back because they won the shadow bracket, and then they came back, and kind of surprised everyone because people didn't know about the shadow bracket. But my point is, he's not good in single eliminations. What he's good at is stamina and puzzles, which is why he does, and like politics and mind games, which is why he does well in the much longer like final challenges, but his game is all structured around getting there.
And just
He's
having
not
the numbers.
actually that's yeah. And like another famous Johnny Bananas elimination moment, which he won, was when Jordan flipped every one of the cards to get him in.
Yes, he called him out.
But it was an event that really required two hands.
For sure.
And Jordan still almost beat him. Like, apparently, remember they had to punch the drywall to climb up the wall?
Yeah.
So, like, Jordan had to hang on with his half a hand and punch with either his elbow or his regular fist. And apparently the drywall gave out because his holes were, like, more jagged as a result.
Yeah.
So, like, it's almost like losing to a one-legged man in an ass-kicking contest. Like, Johnny Banana's not great at those single elimination competitions. I don't know if it's just because it doesn't play to his strengths, or if he kind of like crumbles under the pressure. Like, I don't quite know what the deal is, but that's where he's vulnerable, and he knows it. Like, his game is built around that.
I just think, you know what, John? I honestly think it's just more of an example of something we talk about all the time, right? And, like, fans that will watch the show, they'll crush the Maries of the world. They'll crush the Jemmys of the world. They'll crush even, I guess, the Devins sometimes. You know what I mean? Because those people do a lot of talking, and they don't come in as being the most, like, physically gifted competitors. But to me, what this shows is that the other side of the game is just as important, if not more important, than the actual physical side, right? Because you could have been the biggest physical beast. Like, look at what Josh did this season, right? Josh was a beast, and then Josh ends up getting eliminated so early, and chances are, if you were running a final against him, he probably wipes the floor with everybody that's there. But what does that mean when you're like the third one put out, right? Because your gameplay isn't as good. And so the biggest reason here is just the numbers game. And Johnny Bananas was always successful because he was one of the longest serving castmates. So you have relationships built in coming into the house. And for the last 2 or 3 seasons of the challenge, there's been a lot of, pardon the pun, fresh meat brought onto the show. Right? And so it's going to come with different alliances. And all it was going to take was eventually a season when all these people realize, hey, wait a second, we don't have to sit here and follow this same narrative where every single year the vets just sit around and be like, no, let's throw the rookies in. Right? And just keep going that way. And then eventually, you know, people start to puff their chests out a little. And to go back to Tony's point, Corey was kind of the first one to really puff out his chest and be like, no, I'm not doing this. I got my hit list. This is who I'm going at. And so maybe Corey's strategy was good, just the way he executed it wasn't good. Whereas Devin was talking that talk to Johnny Bananas the whole time. But Devin did such a way better job of playing the mind games with the entire house. And that's really how he defeated Johnny Bananas, right? Because, like, I don't know if you saw the after show or not, but he said that he thought he beat Johnny Bananas before they even got to the elimination, right? And I know that's a swag talking at that point. You know, you're feeling yourself, but I think there's some truth to that, and the way that he manipulated everything, right? And if we go through this, right, like, that situation that he has with Devin, with Nelson, where I think that conversation was supposed to be Nelson gassing up Devin to be like, yo, do you really want Johnny Bananas? I think you could take him. But then Devin flips the conversation and starts telling Nelson about how, okay, well, I think there's rumors going around the house about Johnny Bananas and Kailah hooking up. And at that point, we don't even know if this actually happened. We don't even know the level to, like, how this happened or what it was. But what we do know is that we know Nelson. And if you follow this, series, poor Nelson. Nelson's just trying to find some love. You know, Nelson's just trying to find himself a boo. And every season, poor Nelson just runs into some type of trouble. And this year, it was no different. He finally feels happy. We've been seeing it for weeks now, him and Kailah. And then now Devin hits him with this, and Devin knows. He knows what Nelson's going to do next, right?
Yeah.
Because what does Nelson do, John? What did Nelson do?
He immediately went and he told Natalie first. No, he told Nicole and someone else first.
Yep.
And then he snubbed Kailah.
Yep.
Like, at first he went to, like, look for her, and then he snubbed her. So, like, she's a little shook because she knows something is up. And then he told Natalie. Mm-hmm. And then he kind of confronted Bananas about it in front of everyone.
Yeah.
And, like, Kailah was the last person he spoke to about it.
Well, he played it well because, as you said, right, he finds Nicole and he finds Britni. And he tells them.
Yes, it was Britni.
Yeah.
Thank you.
And the beauty of it is that, you know, if you're Nelson, you're going to other people that you know will also do their part in spreading this around. So now Devin, like, we know that Devin started this because Devin's going to tell you that he revealed this information and that he's been sitting on this information for the right time to fully expose it, which is just also a genius play at this point. But by telling it to Nelson, Nelson then tells Britni and Nicole, two people that are definitely going to go run around and tell the house as well. Now the news is buzzing. Now this is buzzing. So by the time Kailah tries to come back around to see, oh, hey, what's going on, Nelson? And Nelson just punks her. Nicole's already sitting there like, oh, right? And the tension is now building, right? The drama is now building. And, you know, I find it interesting because at the same time, while this was happening, they had their Inquisition, which really didn't mean much, right? Like, the Inquisition was kind of weird, right? The only thing I took away from the Inquisition was that Bananas probably should have been thrown in for his terrible shirt that he had on, that had all the bananas on it.
Yeah, and that's his clubbing shirt, too, which makes me even more mad.
Yeah, it was so terrible. It's like, you should get eliminated for that shirt alone, because that's just... Like, I get it, what you're trying to do, but come on, man. Anyways.
Like, for listeners who don't know me really personally, I have a childhood nickname, Chud, that most people call me. It's like, most of my friends, some family, they call me Chud. And I've got, like, a hoodie that says Chud, and I've got a cap that says Chud, like, in the Gothic script, sort of like one of those classic Compton hats.
Okay.
But, like, you don't wear that to the club, especially when you're on national TV. You know what I mean? Like, at the cottage with the buddies, it's hilarious. I'm wearing something that has my nickname on it, sort of thing. Mm-hmm. Like, ease up on the bananas branding, Johnny. Anyway, you were saying, Sheldon.
I mean, it was just so good as how this starts spreading around the house. And Nelson, you're right. Nelson tells Natalie about it. Bananas tries to deny it, and the point is that Devin and Nelson are now having this conversation with Bananas in front of everyone and letting him kind of sink himself, right? And the interesting part is, in theory, Bananas is right. Bananas is trying to say, first off, this didn't happen, but what does this matter? Like, he then was trying to talk to the Troika, talk to, I guess, mainly Zach and Tony, and he was trying to say, what does this really matter anyways? Like, they're trying to make this as if this has anything to do with the game, and it doesn't, which technically he is right, but it doesn't matter at this point because it's already turned into a thing inside the house. And one thing, once it becomes a thing inside the house, you got to do something. And Bananas didn't really do anything. He didn't try to stop it. He didn't try to talk to Natalie about it. He didn't try to talk to Kailah about it. He just kept denying it. And I think, John, this is really when Bananas messed up. Because I think this is when he gets exposed. Because, again, for the whole season we've been talking about how this Bananas and Natalie thing was kind of a fake showmance, right? That they've been playing up the showmance. So now here comes this whole thing where maybe in real life or real TV life, you know, not real TV life, but you know what I mean? Like, real life on the show, he had a moment where him and Kailah made out, right? So that's like the real Johnny Bananas. But what he's been trying to portray on the show is this lovable, like, showmancy. Oh, this new girl, Natalie, I'm going to take her under my wing. She's beautiful, blah, blah, blah. That's what he's been trying to put forth. But now these two things collide. And they can't really both happen because, on the one hand, he did make out with her, or he did make out with Kailah, but he can't acknowledge that because that would then ruin the image he's been trying to put up as being this good boyfriend type. So You know what I mean? So he should be trying to downplay the fact that, well, me and Natalie aren't even anything anyways, but we already know that, right? So see how he's caught in between the real life Johnny Bananas and the fake TV life Johnny Bananas that he's been trying to put up, and now you're screwed. You're kind of caught in the middle. You're damned if you do, damned if you don't.
And he alienated some of his closest allies. Like Cara Maria is probably one of his closest allies, probably outside of Natalie, his closest female ally, although
and that's just,
obviously that's sort of like by convenience.
Yeah, that's just off of them both being the longest serving people on the show, really.
Yeah, and like Cara and Johnny do not like each other in real life. No. Like that, they've both made that abundantly clear. But they understand how the game works. Mm-hmm. And Cara said, like, Johnny, you haven't spoken to Natalie.
Yeah.
Why not? And he's like, it's not a big deal. And she was like, even as he was like, oh, we're not really a couple. Or like, we're not that serious. And she was like, even as a friend, you should go clear the air with her.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right? And he wouldn't do it. And so even Cara is kind of like, what are you doing? Like,
yeah.
Like, handle your business better. Like, even, like, let's say Johnny was telling the truth and nothing happened. Mm-hmm. He didn't handle it well. I believe that Devin and Kailah were telling the truth, mm-hmm. that there was something.
But even she said it was just a makeout. Like, I don't even know she said it full on makeout. She said, like, he kissed her, right? And then they did the reenactment, and it was kind of funny or whatever. But again,
and Kyle was on his knees, and
yeah, which made for a pretty funny scene. But again, right, like, he just messed up. Like, I think if you're Johnny Bananas, you had to, like, play one way or the other. You had to either say, well, what's the big deal? Me and Natalie were cool, but we were just really hanging out. And he did acknowledge at one point, he's like, I barely even made out with Natalie since she's been in the house. Like, he did acknowledge that. But if he went fully that way, just to say, well, me and Natalie, it's not like we were exclusive. It's not like we were anything. Like, she'll even tell you that. Like, nothing has actually happened. So, yeah, drunk, I made out with Kailah. No big deal. If he just even acknowledged that. But, again, he tried to sit in the middle. And you can't sit in the middle in this case, right? Because, again, you're in the middle of making the Johnny Bananas, making a TV show, and the gimmick of the showmans, and then now having to play the real game. And you can't do that because it doesn't match with who he was trying to portray. And so he should have just either told the truth, and instead he just tried to keep up this whole charade. And the club scene that he had, oh, man. The whole thing with the club, first off, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, Kyle...
This is your area of expertise, so just...
But there's a lot of drama going down, right? Like, normally, I'm in the club scenes for, to see the dance scenes and try to see what kind of music they're getting down to and whatever. But there's just full-on drama going down and, like, real, like, dirt going on. And first off, you got Kyle, who is low-key making some moves behind the scenes. Like, Kyle's been... almost like Zach in the background making big moves and being involved in everything. But instead, Kyle's very open about turning on people, right? This entire season, he's been involved in the drama somehow. And actually, it's been a lot of times at the club where he goes up to whoever's in power and will basically throw somebody under the bus. And in this instance, he was telling Tony, now's the time to pull the trigger. Now's the time to put him in. And he's asking Tony if he agrees, And to me, that was a telltale sign to me that Tony definitely should do it, because if he does do it, and even if Bananas comes back, he doesn't have the numbers. Because I would have thought that Kyle probably would have been on Bananas' side, right?
Yep.
What do you make of Kyle's game so far and how Kyle's playing the game?
I think he's playing the game really well. I feel like it could blow up in his face.
Okay.
Just because, excuse me, just because he still has, like, Nelson should still be pissed at him because Nelson saw him commit to Corey, do not throw Corey in, and then he immediately threw Corey in the next day.
Yep.
But I think this was perfectly played, where much like maybe Zach and certainly like Devin, Tony was the one who put his neck on the line, not Kyle.
For sure.
And Kyle was right to give him that little nudge. Mm-hmm. And what Kyle was saying is accurate. Well, I think it's sort of accurate. It's not a given that Johnny Bananas is going to win automatically just because he's the winningest of all time. But I do think he's right. Like, at the end of the day, if you're going to win, you need to be in the final three of your gender. Traditionally, they don't know yet that this is going to be winner take all regardless of gender. Mm-hmm. But, like, you need to eliminate your top competition. Johnny Bananas certainly qualifies.
Yeah.
And I think in a house like that, chaos is your friend to an extent, like when things are in disarray. And Johnny is such a stabilizing influence. Like, he keeps people in line. He forms hard alliances, right? Like, basically, if Johnny Bananas is in the house, you're either for him or you're against him. And that's how the house breaks down.
Yeah.
With Johnny gone, and we start to see this after he was eliminated, it's way more wide open, mm-hmm. right? Like, we saw Nelson and Natalie starting to form an alliance, sort of. Like, there's...
Yeah, it was one of those things where, it's like the 10th alliance you see Natalie make with someone in the house. But yeah, I know what you're saying.
But
I know what you're saying.
It creates, with Johnny gone, it creates a power vacuum. Mm-hmm. Let me ask you, now that Johnny's gone, who would you say is the, like, front runner to win this season?
I actually agree with Zach. I think Zach's in a great position. Because Zach is, there's no drama with Zach, but also beyond that, Tony is kind of the front man, as you said, right? Tony's the front man. So mm-hmm. if someone's going to come at their alliance, they're going to go at Tony because he's been the one that at least is on the front line of making these big moves. And Zach, I think, is in such a good position because he's been winning challenges, but also he's been keeping his nose out of the shit, right? And, that's the biggest part of all this. The way that he's politically been playing the game has been really good. So he wasn't going to get any blowback at all.
No, but on top of that, a follow-up question, who do you think, if you're in the house at this moment in the season, to your point, you don't think of Zach as being the top person, right? Mm-hmm. Like, it's a lot less clear. You're more likely to think that maybe Tony's the top guy, or maybe Devin, because he just pulled that power move. Maybe. Like, you see what I mean? Like, there's sort of an element of perception is reality.
It's interesting. And then there's also a lot bubbling on the girls' side, too, right? And the girls' side, which all, as you said, this is all going to come into one soon enough. The girls' side, it's kind of like scraps. Do you know what I mean? Because nobody has, like, their full alliance, if that makes sense. Although, what did go down kind of makes it seem like maybe there might be an alliance, a bigger alliance forming, but I don't know, with these personalities, let's say, I could see them butting heads in the coming weeks, so I don't know how solid this Mean Girl alliance could become.
Yeah. And, like, Natalie is no longer powerful, right? And the Suicide Squad is also a little crippled because they're without Marie. Mm-hmm. So it really opens the game up. I have to ask you, what did you think of the competition itself between Devin and Johnny? Like, the game that they played.
I thought it was a really good challenge. I thought it was a very cool challenge just in terms of... Well, first off, before we even get to that, like, the way that it all broke down just in terms of the votes, I thought that was the very impressive part and a very, interesting part from Tony's side. Because he talked about how much he learned from Johnny Bananas. And I think his whole little spiel that he gave before throwing Bananas in, I think that was straight out of the Bananas challenge playbook in terms of how you deliver it for TV. Right?
Not quite as good as Johnny does it. A little disjointed. A little Tony confused spin on the Johnny Bananas pre-vote speech.
Yeah, but I think it was just very good in the sense, he says bananas. He kind of made you think that he was going to throw in Nelson, right? I think even Nelson thought that he was going in because Tony steps up and he's like, bananas, I looked up to you. But I think that if you were in my position, you would probably make the exact same choice. Him and Nelson hasn't really had the exact same, or they haven't really had the best history with each other. But I'm sorry, Nelson. You're going to have to wait a little longer to go into an elimination. My pick's for bananas. I was like, oh. And that one picture, there's this one image of Nelson's face and Nelson and Leroy's reaction just in the moment when Tony makes the thing. Like, it is just such a great image. And it summed up the moment. It was just a great moment going into the elimination. And the one thing, too, I thought as soon as you saw what the challenge was, I thought Devin was going to win. And, they did a good job of cutting it together to make it seem as if Bananas made it close. Like, he put up a good fight, which I think he did. Because there was a scene at the very end, it shows like he only had maybe like 5 or 6 lights that were kind of close to each other, when Devin won. But I think the telltale sign to me was they showed Devin's strategy right off the beginning. They told us what Devin's strategy was. And Devin says, I was going to divide up the board and I was going to divide it into 6 rectangles, I think he said. And I was going to go one at a time and make sure I'm going across the board, which makes total sense because as it kept cutting back to bananas, you could see that as he was moving forward, there'd be 2 or 3 straggler lights, let's say, that he didn't get to. And once you have to go back and try to, figure that out, I think you're almost like messing yourself up because at certain points you might be hitting the wrong light. Do you know what I mean? It just makes it so much more difficult to have to go back and get like one random light that's in a block that you've already hit. So Devin's strategy, I think, was just better. And I also think Bananas was probably just rattled too because he talked so much shit. And the reason why he was talking so much shit was because he never really thought that he'd be going in at that point, right? So he was so insanely confident going in. So then now you catch yourself in the moment. And I don't know if it's nerves. I don't know if he was in his own head. But the reality is Devin was prepared to go in. So Devin's ready. Bananas, I don't know if Bananas definitely wasn't ready because, again, another thing Devin said on the finale, on the after show, he said Bananas was so confident that he wasn't going in, he didn't even pack.
What?
Yes, Devin said that Bananas was so confident he wasn't even going in that he did not even pack. So, that tells you that once he is going in, think about how much your head's just moving and you're like, oh shit. They actually threw me in. I can't believe this is a thing. Oh no, like I might actually be going home. And, that little split second of hesitation could cost you the whole entire finale game, right? The whole challenge game. The elimination, right? So
to put a spin on what you said, in that moment where they're like standing side by side and like TJ's explaining the game, Devin is where he wants to be. Yeah. Devin was not exaggerating when he said he wanted to go one-on-one with Bananas.
For sure.
He was where he wanted to be. This was the fruition of his plan. And Johnny Bananas, to your point, his head was spinning. He didn't expect this. Apparently he hadn't packed.
Yeah.
His alliance just turned on him. And he's been talking shit against this guy, and it's the sort of competition that Devin, was made for Devin.
Yeah.
Right? Like, Devin, not the greatest athlete. He would tell you that himself. Mm-hmm. But he is very analytical, very strategic, and that game was all about strategy, tactics, focus, planning ahead, being organized, focus, and Devin had no distractions.
You could tell that it was an intense elimination as well because I think it was Bananas that mentioned it, that everyone was quiet. And normally during those eliminations, when everyone's watching, people are cheering, people are maybe trying to help, but you couldn't really help in this situation, right? And he just said people were quiet. Like, you could hear a pin drop. And I think maybe that silence as well becomes super deafening and distracting, you know? Like, if you're not focused, like, it becomes such a, like, weird thing. I don't know. I just think that the way that everything played out was so perfect. It was a very good challenge. It was a unique challenge and a different challenge, but a really good elimination as well. And yeah, shout out to Tony for making the big move. Shout out to Devin for delivering on, you know, his shit talking and calling out of Bananas that he wanted Bananas. And Bananas kind of looked really bad. You know, for big bad Bananas, who's supposed to be the man on this show, like, he looked really bad in this episode. Because the other thing too, like, which we'll get to, the whole Kailah drama with all her shit.
Yeah.
Bananas was kind of nowhere to be found in this whole thing. Like, he's there and in the background, but he's not really doing anything. Like, we don't really see him either, you know, trying to break it up. Like, I think at one point he's trying to help them put Kailah's stuff, her luggage back in to her bags and stuff, but, you know, he, I think, could have handled this a little differently, for lack of a better term, you know, and maybe could have prevented this whole thing from happening if he just, you know, maybe sat them both down and been like, this isn't that big of a deal. And instead, the tack that he took, like, I almost think that the way that the show ended, I guess what I'm trying to say is the way that Bananas went out, I think it was justified by his actions the whole way through, right? It was almost like karma catching up to him. Because if he just, like, sat them both down and, like, you know, whatever, it's not a big deal. I didn't mean to hurt you, Natalie. This was kind of while we were still getting to know each other, whatever. The kiss with Kailah wasn't that big of a deal. Whatever it was, right? He could have played this like a more, like a gentleman. As much of a gentleman as he could, right? And instead, what did he say to Kailah earlier on in the episode? He was like, well, you know, I'm not really that mad because essentially I have, like, the two hottest girls fighting over me. And she's like, we're not actually fighting over you at all, right?
Yeah.
And he's like, well, you are, kinda. And it's like, no, right? And again, like,
no, not really.
That's the mentality that he has, right? Like, he's thinking, oh, this is cool. This looks like the two hottest girls in the house really like me, and they're fighting over me. And it's like, no, like, get your head out of your ass and realize what's actually going on, right? Like, that's not it. It's just the other girls trying to stick up for Natalie, which, again, we'll get to on a whole other side. But
yeah,
the way that he handled it all, I think he mishandled the whole situation. And so him losing in a glorious way where, like, you didn't even pack your bags because you were so confident you were coming back, I just think it was so fitting to see him go out that way in this season. And talking shit on the way out too, you know, saying that, you know, he's going to come back and this is going to have repercussions for both Devin and Tony going forward. Just like, I mean, unless you're coming back with your full squad of CT and, you know what I mean? Like, it's going to be really interesting down the line to see how the numbers play out. I guess that's what I'm saying. Like, are you buying into, you know, Devin and Tony should be worried going forward?
No, I'm not. And I'll tell you why. Johnny is an innovator in this game. Okay. Johnny is the first one to truly understand the importance of an alliance and, like, holding onto your alliance the whole way through. He was the first one, I think, that really understood that what people are looking for in the early stages of any season of the challenge is just an excuse to throw people in.
Yeah.
Which is why he was always picking on rookies.
Exactly.
Because it was just like an easy automatic. Like, oh, you're a rookie, you don't have an alliance, get out of here.
Yep.
And that takes care of the first 3 or 4 weeks. He also, I think, was the first to really recognize the importance of camera time.
Yes.
And how the production, whether they want to admit it or not, can help you out. Mm-hmm. And he's like good outside the box. Yeah. He's a good outside the box thinker in terms of, like, trying to think ahead and find out what the challenge competition might be, whether it's a puzzle or endurance or strength or whatever. And he also is an innovator because when he first came on the show, like way back when, he wasn't in bad shape, but he wasn't in, like, killer shape. And he's the one that really was, like, start to work out during seasons. Like, if you watch Cutthroat, he and Derek are the only ones that work out, Derek K. Mm-hmm. And it's just with, like, resistance bands that looks like Johnny brought along with him. Uh-huh.
Okay.
And like now they have like a full gym.
Yeah.
But the problem with Johnny is he innovated all this, but he hasn't innovated in a while. And the game has changed a bit, right? Mm-hmm. Like that innovation I just mentioned of working out over the course of the season, and like he and Wes once mentioned this to us, I think in his first interview with us. He said that the thing about Johnny is he's very good at politics and he's just above average or average at everything else.
Yeah.
And like Johnny got into shape to improve his chances in like physical competitions. The thing is that now, and like that worked like 10 seasons ago because CT was by far the physical peak, but he was a monster basically and would eliminate himself one way or the other.
Yeah.
But now, first of all, you have CT is still physically dominant, but he is a much kinder, gentler CT. But also, across the board, the athleticism has improved.
Yeah.
Right? Like, all the women are in much better shape. You have Zach, and you have Corey, and you have Tony, and like Darrell is sometimes showing up. And you have a lot of people now who are in great shape.
Yeah.
Even rookies who come up just looking ripped. And like Johnny is older now, and like he's not the pure athlete that a Zach is, as an example, or a Leroy.
Yeah.
So, and their social games are based off of Johnny's social game. Like they've learned from what Johnny has done. So he hasn't really caught up with the times, and I think that's really reflected in this episode, because one of the things that's changed is that in sort of Johnny's heyday, when he had Kenny and Evan as his running partners, it was a very misogynist, bro-y sort of frat house where I mean, the fact is the men ran the house.
Yeah.
And that's not to say the women weren't capable, but the men just set the tone, where if you didn't have good men on your side or on your team, you weren't going anywhere. And it was very much the men would carry the competition, except for a few select women, like Jen with 2 N's, Evelyn, who is always very dominant. But otherwise, they're more of the Paula camp, or to a lesser extent, early Sarah, where they were like maybe good at puzzles and good at the social game, but they were just like having a good time. But that's not the case anymore. Like, the women are just as strong as the men, right? You've got Laurel and Cara Maria and Kailah and Jenna are all really good physically, and their social games are improving, and their political games are strong. But he hasn't anticipated that. Like, he still just thinks like, oh, you just need like a good group of guys. You just need your Zach and your Leroy and your Tony and your set. Not seeing that, you know, making sure that you're in good graces with Natalie and Kaylee when this social drama is popping off is important. So when Johnny says, like, oh, well, you know, I just think it's cool that the 2 hottest chicks in the house are fighting over me, he's missing the point. Right? Like, he doesn't see the coming storm around him because he's still in that, like, late 90s Limp Bizkit mentality. You know what I'm saying?
No, I definitely hear you. And I think too that, you know, another funny side of it is we talked to Jemmye a couple episodes ago, right? And Jemmye talked about the Bananas curse, right? How Bananas has just been cursed ever since he took Sarah's money. He hasn't won a challenge since. I don't even know if he's made a final. Right? I don't think he's even made a final since, right? And obviously we're not counting the champs versus series, right? Like, we're talking the real...
No, man, that's preseason. Yeah, that's exhibition.
The real seasons of the challenge, right? So the interesting part to me from all that is, you know, the way that he's been playing the game, if we're going to look at the karma aspects or kind of the, like, dirty pool that he's been playing in, you know, think of the notes writing, right? And writing the notes and trying to make that a whole storyline this season, right? Like, that was just weird. That was just a weird thing to do. Like, get your sister to write notes and then pretend that it was some other girl to try to start drama in the house. Like, that's just a weird thing to do. I think that's karma catching up to him as well. You know what I mean? All the things that happened to Johnny Bananas in this episode where he thinks people turned against him. I mean, Johnny Bananas was the one that once famously said, all is fair in love, war, and challenges, right? So can he really be mad? If that's his own line, he's the one that said that. And I mean, if you go post-episode last night, Devin was getting, he was feeling himself even on Twitter, you know? He said on Twitter after the show, he said, for all you that said I'd never beat Bananas, ha 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 ha, get used to it. I'm not going anywhere. The phallic fruit just got beat by his self-proclaimed weakest opponent. Then a bunch of hashtags calling him a scrub, loser, stuff like that. Then followed that up by saying, for all you saying that T Reigns is fucked in future seasons, take a look at the now. Bananas has no one. He'll come crawling back like the worm he is. Tony just mind-fucked your goat. Deal with it. Ha 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 ha. So it is just backing up. Like, these guys know what they did, and they know that they don't have to be worried going forward. Because even if you look at future seasons, unless you're saying you're getting a house that has Bananas, Leroy, Darrell, CT. Do you know what I mean? Like, unless you're getting all those guys to come back to another season, I don't know how the numbers are ever going to go back into Johnny Bananas' side. And the biggest factor of it all is maybe he has to make an adjustment like CT and fall it more into the background, right? Because as much as CT was a vet, as much as CT is one of the best challenge competitors ever, we've seen CT lately on these shows. He's a lot quieter. He's playing the background a little more, while Johnny Bananas is trying to be like, oh, I'm the face and I'm this and I'm that, which is cool, but that doesn't really help your game going forward, right? So no. I'm super interested to see how this goes forward and how this all plays out. But again, shout out to Devin's strategy, his strategy throughout this entire scenario, and shout out to Tony, because I think that was just a well-played effort on both sides. And see ya, Johnny Bananas. We'll see what happens next season. He was going back and forth with Jemmye because he was calling Jemmye out for because Jemmye obviously had been going back and forth with Bananas on Twitter. They've been going back and forth the whole year, right? And so Jemmye was calling out Bananas earlier on in the season, saying that he's a bully because he's calling all the girls ugly and fat and whatever. And so Bananas responded to Jemmye during this episode saying, oh, maybe if she put this much effort into actual challenges, she would be successful. And they're kind of going back and forth because he's now calling her a bully for what she was doing, her role in the whole bed tossing incident. And then Jemmy's response was simply, you're still cursed.
Let's talk about the bed tossing incident.
Yes, let's. Because arguably this was the bigger deal. No, it's close. I don't know which was the bigger deal. Because Bananas going out and the way that he went out was massive, but maybe this all led up to Bananas going out. So maybe this was the bigger deal. And I think it really starts if you go back to, when all the noise starts building around the house and then they go out that night, there is a situation where after Bananas and Kailah have their awkward conversation, at the same time, we see Britni, Kailah, Natalie, all sitting down having a conversation at a table. Kailah comes over and Kailah tells her, "Nah, I don't think you should sit down here. Like, we don't want to see you sitting down here." And Kailah's kind of like, "What are you talking about?" They end up going back and forth, which is just hilarious. Zach is just sitting in the background as always, taking it all in and laughing, which I enjoyed a lot because he's well played again by Zach. But the best part was they start arguing. Kailah says, "You should go back to the UK," which is a terrible chirp, by the way. And Kailah's is even worse, and she's like, "This is actually closer to my home than yours, so maybe you should go back to America." And I'm just like, what is going on right now? Like, this is horrible. But my main question is...
Sheldon, you're always talking about G-checks? That was a geography check.
Yes, right? I was like, what is going on here? This is so terrible. But the thing that I want to ask, because I don't really understand, why do you think that Kailah, Britni, and Jemmye are so quick to be Natalie's buddy right now?
I don't know. And I wouldn't go so far as to say this is bullying. I also think that's a term that's thrown around a lot. And when it comes to people in their late 20s and early 30s, I don't think you can really be bullied at that age.
Mm-hmm.
But that said, I think they really overreacted, especially for like, I know that they're like starting to hit it off with Natalie, but like I'm not sure that they're at like ride or die tossing mattresses status yet. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I just didn't understand it. And I wondered, the only thing I could come to, the conclusion I could come to, was I think that maybe they just have like enemies, right? And I think that because, not so much that they like Natalie or side with Natalie, I think it's much more the fact that they want to get rid of Kailah. That's something that they all want to happen. And so that made them all onto the same side. That's the only thing that I can come up with, because I don't get why they were saying Kailah was annoying and why they didn't like her and why they were so like angry with her. Because Natalie didn't seem that upset about this whole thing. Like she kind of seemed like she was upset, but we didn't get the scene where like she looks like that pissed off or that mad or that, vengeful towards Kailah at all, really.
No, she didn't seem like that bent out of shape. And also, I think, like, we got to break down sort of the order of events here.
Mm-hmm.
Kailah and Nelson were not together.
No.
When this kiss happened.
No.
So Nelson's not wronged. Like, I mean, Nelson handled it the way I would expect Nelson to handle a situation like this.
Yeah.
But Nelson really wasn't wronged. It was before he and Kailah were really vibing.
For sure.
So, no harm, no foul there. And these, like, Jemmye is one of the ones who has been outspoken in criticizing Johnny Bananas and Natalie for having a showmance.
For sure.
And, like, maybe some things have come to light since since the Kailah thing blew up. But, like, it's not... if it's a showmance, then you shouldn't really get that upset.
Mm-hmm.
Nelson wasn't really hurt because this is like Kailah and Nelson could have continued to like vibe on each other.
Yeah.
Right?
I feel like Nelson, Nelson's beef, I think, was he just felt more like an idiot because of the whole vote. Right? And I think the way that the vote went down, that made him feel more of an idiot than, the whole bananas and not the whole bananas angle of it. I think the fact that when the way that the vote went down, like he was kind of like, why the hell did she vote for bananas? Like that makes no sense. Like obviously, the move is that you should be on my side and you should be on the house side. But what is it that you have with bananas? And then when he found that out, it was kind of like, oh, I'm a chump. Like I'm probably going to look like a chump again on TV. And that sucks. I think that was probably...
Get used to it, Nelson.
No, but I really think that was probably his beef with the whole thing, right? But, like, to get back to the girls for a second, my thing is I think what Jemmye was doing... Remember, Jemmye, her whole means for getting by in this game, it's all strategy, right? It's all gameplay. It's all people skills. And I think what Jemmye, in particular, was doing in this instance was... she's shoring up some form of alliance, some form of friendship, some form of a team here, right? And so, if you look at how things are breaking down now, okay, well, everyone seems to have turned on bananas. Because if you remember, wasn't it just last week, she didn't vote for bananas. She said that she thought bananas, remember, Devin was mad at her, Nelson was mad at her, asking her why didn't she vote for bananas, and she says, well, I think bananas can take me far away or further in this game. So fast forward just I don't know how many real life days after that happened, right? But fast forward, and now all of a sudden, as it appears that the whole house is turning on bananas, Jemmye is now at the forefront of all that as well. And why? Because now you're going where the power is. The power is now away from Johnny Bananas. So you don't want to be associated with Johnny Bananas at all. You want to be associated with Natalie and the other side of the house, really. So now I bet you're going to see her with Nelson, right? I bet you're going to see her buddy-buddy with Natalie now. But she did this as well, I think, to separate herself from Bananas. That's what I think. But anyways, the way that they went about it, like, again, I agree with you too. I don't think bullying is the right term to use. I think you're totally right. In 2018, there's a lot of terms that get thrown out just because it's an easy title or label to put on things, whether it's bullying, whether it's racism, whether it's sexism. I think it happens a lot where these things get thrown out way too much.
Yeah.
And especially by someone like Cara Maria, who was so upset and even was on Twitter talking about the bullying and all that. And it was like, didn't you throw Jordan's stuff into the pool during Dirty 30?
Yeah.
Wasn't that a thing that happened?
Yeah.
Right? And so
and it floated.
Yeah. Right? So like how hypocritical is that now to be like, oh, you guys are such bullies. You guys are bullying Kailah. And it's like, they threw her bed over the railing and threw her luggage over. At most, like, because there has to be a line where we know they prank a lot in the house, right? So, like, how far away from that is just being a prank, right? Like, I don't think it was bullying. I think that's going a little too far because, to me anyways, I think we're moving further and further away in society, which I think this is a bad thing. We're moving further away in society from having real life consequences. And what I mean by that is people can be allowed to do whatever they want and people can react how they want to react. You know what I mean? And so we can't move that far away from that because then people are too able to hide behind, oh, bullying this or bullying, right? And it's just like, that's not really bullying. If you do something to me, sure, go ahead. You can do that. But just believe that there might be a reaction coming from me if that's what you decide to do. Do you know what I mean? And I think that having those consequences forces you to think about your behavior, right? Like if Jemmye and them were afraid that Kailah might punch them in the face, right? They probably wouldn't do that. Do you know what I mean?
I do, and I hear you on all of that. I agree with what you're saying. What bothers me, though, is that Kailah was the one that was being, like, hated on so hard. From what she said,
yes.
Johnny approached her, and Johnny was the one in a showmance relationship, whatever, with Natalie.
Yeah.
Not that Kailah's the victim in the kissing. It sounds like she kissed him back.
Yeah.
But, like, why is she being treated as the homewrecker?
Yeah.
A, it didn't wreck the home. They continued on. B, Johnny's the one in the relationship. Like, Johnny's the one who crossed the boundary.
Yeah.
Kailah did not cross a boundary.
So you're saying his bed should have been thrown over and his luggage should have been thrown over.
Yes. I mean, and, like, I know that he did suffer a consequence, sort of.
Yeah, you got eliminated.
But their anger should have been more directed at Johnny rather than Kailah. The one thing I'll say that Kailah could have done to help her situation was when they said to her, like, you shouldn't be sleeping in this room tonight, she should have said, like, you know what? Obviously tempers are flaring. I'll go see about sleeping in one of the other rooms for the night, and we can talk about when we're all sober in the morning.
Yeah, I think, like, the whole thing just escalated so quickly, and I think that the Jemmye, I think that the Jemmye, Britni, and Kailah side, like, not only did I think they kind of knew the storyline angle of what was going to happen. Like, they were kind of going to jump on board and be like, oh, fuck this bitch, blah, 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 and just go, like, excuse me, for lack of a better term, the mean girl catty route. And like, oh, we're going to side with Natalie. And it didn't even really have so much to do with Natalie as much as it was, get this girl out of our room. We're against her. We're going to team up. We're going to do this. Get this girl out. And it was more that than actually they're mad about Natalie, or Natalie was that upset that she didn't want to be in the same room as Kailah. But I do agree with you. Kailah could have just said, you know what, if you guys are really... Kailah could have went to Natalie at some point and just said, hey, just so you know, like, nothing really happened or wasn't that big of a deal. That's why it never came up. That's why, like, I never thought it was that big of a deal. I didn't know what was going on with you guys. Like, and we don't know if that conversation actually happened. But also, the other side of this is who in the house is playing off the thought process that Natalie and Johnny are a real thing, right? Because that's the other side of this. Because Kailah and Britni might be on this thing where they're like, oh, well, you know, they're in a showmance and fuck this other girl. But Kailah might be like, oh, I thought this was fake the whole time. Like, I never thought it was a real thing. So why would I tell Natalie? Why would I have a conversation with Natalie? Why would I leave Natalie's room? Like, I never thought this was a real thing. And I think that might be the bigger factor in all this, right? And so that's why you had such, you know, varying opinions of what was going down. Because to me, the low-key MVP in all this, while this whole drama's going down where they throw over her clothes and throw over her bed and they're yelling back and forth, is Killa Cam. Killa Cam comes out of nowhere and she's trying to grab Kailah and she's just saying, hey, like, if it's one-on-one, whatever, cool, do what you guys are doing, but all you guys yelling at her, like, what's the point in that? And in that instance, I kind of agree. Because, again, I don't think that's bullying. I'm not saying that. But I just think that, like, what's the point in all of you guys who really don't have much to do with anything, right? What's the point in all you guys yelling at Kailah to get out of the room? Like, that doesn't really make sense. I understand if Natalie was involved, and so you guys think you're having Natalie's back. But Natalie's a grown person. And so even if this was a real relationship, I think she's a grown-ass person that she could speak for herself. And then if you guys are backing her up, cool. But Natalie wasn't even really involved. Natalie didn't even seem to be that mad. And for it to get to that level seemed kind of fucked up to me.
Two things. Kaylee on Twitter pointed to a screenshot of Natalie helping the girls pick up the mattress.
Ooh.
So, although Natalie didn't carry it the whole way, she at least knew that they were removing the mattress from the room and, like, participated in that, although didn't perhaps know how far it would go. Second of all, Kaylee also accused Kailah of being told by production that if she wants more screen time, she has to get, like, more involved in drama. Basically, Kaylee accused Kailah of doing all this just to stay relevant.
I buy that. I definitely buy that. I mean, the other side that people don't realize, and also, you know me, I love the behind the scenes and thinking of, like, what the producers are doing. For people that don't know, like, that definitely is a thing that would happen on these kind of reality shows, right? Because you have people that are very conscious about not only making it far in the game, but also, you know, their personality, their brand, for lack of a better term, right? And people that want to be a part of the episodes, part of the storylines, because maybe they have other ventures outside of the show that they're trying to promote. Now, Johnny Bananas might be the pinnacle of all that, but someone, for example, like Marie, who we talk about a lot, you know, maybe she has other, like, ambitions, other goals. You know, we see Tori. Tori does music. Tori wants to do some acting, I think, as well, right? Like, you have people that are trying to build their brand when they come onto the show. But also, to counter that, the other side that doesn't get talked about nearly enough is you have producers that are trying to put together a television show, right? Mm-hmm. And so as much as your television show is based upon, you know, okay, well, here's a challenge, and then here's the elimination, and here's a deliberation, and then there's an episode, right? Like, you obviously need a lot more than that to put together, 15 episodes in a season, right? You need more than that. And so that's why producers are heavily involved, definitely trying to say, hey, well, you know, they might slide you a little bit of information in your confessional to kind of lead you in a certain way to let you know this is what's really going on. You know, they might tell you, hey, they might pull you aside and tell you, hey, you know, this is going on, just to give you a little heads up to build up a little bit of a drama, to build up a story arc, right? Because different shows are put together in different ways, right? So you might have people that are in charge of episodes 1 to 2 or 2 to 3 or whatever, right? But there are definitely people behind the scenes pulling the strings. So whether that is true or not, I don't know. I mean, maybe we could try to find out. But
Yeah.
I definitely see that as being a possibility as to where, especially as things like the after show become a thing, people want to be a part of that. People want to have a storyline to talk about when they get to the finale or the finale episodes, right? Where the whole cast comes back. So I could definitely see that being a thing. And just thinking about Kailah and Britni and Jemmye, I mean, Jemmye's told us that, she is there to stir the drama. She's there for the storylines. That's how you get further, and that's how she's going to further herself in the game. So that does make sense to me.
And it's a symbiotic relationship, right? Like, to your point, they're trying to to your point, the producers need exciting things happening in the house. Mm-hmm. But also, it's not just about building brands. They get paid, the contestants, the talent, if you will, get paid per episode. Mm-hmm. And the more episodes you have under your belt, the higher your per episode rate. So Johnny Bananas has the highest per episode rate because he's been on the most seasons and he always lasts deep into the season. And furthermore, they get paid to be on the reunion special.
Yeah.
Right?
Yep.
So if you don't have a good reason to be on the reunion special, you don't get paid for that, at least. And, like, I don't want to say it's life-changing money, but it's, like, a good salary per annual, like, per annum. You're not... You can... If you are on the show enough and get enough per episode appearance, you don't even need the winnings. You can make a decent living. There is an episode of the No Quitters podcast that Evan and Kenny were on. And in it, Evan says that he had a conversation with Nani. And he said he threw out some like crazy figure that she was getting per episode to appear. I feel it was like, it was in the 5 figures. So it's like 10,000 per episode.
Oh, wow.
So if you appear on like 7 episodes of the challenge, that's a good living wage. Like, that's $70,000 a year.
Yeah.
That's fine. Right? For like 6 weeks of work or whatever it is.
Yeah.
7 episodes and $70,000, that's a fine living. Especially if you're like a Cara Maria who lives in Montana, where $70,000 goes further. Mm-hmm. Right? Like, they don't all live in New York City or Los Angeles. So I have to ask you, Sheldon, I think it's obvious, but who killed it for you this week?
I don't think it is that obvious, because my pick is Tony. Like, I think, like, Devin did the work, but I think it's Tony, because I don't think that Devin gets this done without Tony having the balls to put in bananas. And the reason why I'm giving it to Tony is because I think it's an overarching, like, MVP to date kind of award I'm going to hand out to Tony, if that makes sense.
Okay.
An overarching MVP for the whole season so far, just because even if you go back to the eating challenge and the performance he's put up there, he's been winning challenges, he's been manipulating himself going into the Troika, him and Zach, and they've been making the teams to consistently either put themselves or their allies into the Troika, and Johnny Bananas didn't even realize it at the time, but in the weeks that Tony or Zach weren't in, it was Johnny Bananas, and Johnny Bananas had their back, right, for those weeks as well. So this has all been a mastermind play to basically be running the house to this point. And so I got to give it up to Tony, just because what he's done. And I think because of, we talk so much about seeing CT change, right? And kind of we didn't see CT change on the show, if that makes sense. Like,
no, not really.
Like he came back and he's like, oh, he's a different guy. Tony, we're literally seeing him change a little more each and every season he comes back. And he's been improving a little more each and every season that he's come back. And this so far has been his best season. And maybe is it going to pay off this season? Like, is he going to win? I don't know. He might be too much in the forefront of this whole, revolution, for lack of a better term. So I don't know if the other dudes in the house are smart. They're going to see what's going on and try to take out Tony and Zach. But I don't know if that's going to be a thing yet. I don't know, but Tony to date has done the best job to me in terms of controlling the house. And we talked about it weeks ago, John. I'm going to pat ourselves on the back a little bit here because weeks ago we called the fact that Tony and Zach were really running the house, right? We called that, 3 episodes ago?
Yeah,
I want to say something like that. And so, but they were doing it on the low, right? Like we called that they were running the house, even though they didn't really get that narrative out there really. Like the show wasn't edited in that sense at all. Like there was no like big proclamation from them that they were running the house until now. Now it's apparent that we see it. And for the work that they've done to date, I'm going to give them a round of applause and say, hey, Tony, and to a lesser extent, Zach, you guys are killing it.
Well, I see what you're saying, but I'm going with Devin. Maybe it's the obvious pick.
No,
but
it's
to
not
me,
a wrong pick. Obviously, he dominated.
He dominated, and how often in the challenge do you see a plan perfectly executed from start to finish?
Yeah.
You never see that. You never see a plan go so smoothly in terms of social game and making it work with in-competition results.
Yeah. And you're right, too. Just the fact that he not only called out Johnny Bananas, but then to mastermind the whole just, house drama to coincide with him calling out Johnny Bananas, and the fact that he kept under wraps, like he had that information about Johnny and Kailah for so long, and was just saving it for the right moment to where he knew that he'd be able to have Nelson as an ally, to where he knew that people would be able to convince Tony to actually put Johnny Bananas in. Yeah.
And his hands aren't dirty at all.
Yeah.
Right? Because as far as we know, the only person who knows that he's the source of the information is Nelson. Mm-hmm. And Nelson's not mad at him because it has all the appearances of him telling the truth.
Yeah.
So Nelson, in Nelson's mind, he's like, hey, Devin did me a solid.
Exactly.
He told me what was really going on. Mm-hmm. He opened my eyes. He was polite about it. Like, he didn't, embarrass me. It was a one-on-one conversation. He told me very gently, and he opened my eyes. And now, Kailah, good riddance to bad rubbish. And furthermore, it led to Bananas going, great. No one else has any reason to be mad at Devin, right? He didn't manipulate, he did manipulate them, but in such a way that no one's going to be pissed with him. Only Kailah and Johnny would be mad at him, and they're gone.
Yeah.
So.
No, definitely.
So it worked out perfectly.
Also,
and
too,
that's
I don't think
so rare to see.
No, you're totally right. There'd be nobody that's on, oh, Devin, how could you do that? Like, everyone's going to either side with Natalie. And I think Natalie has done a very good job as well of being playing the woe is me kind of side of this, right? And it appeared that she was making another alliance with Nelson. No more showmances, right, Nelly? And obviously all the girls are on her side. It would appear. And wait, what did you think of Kailah leaving?
I thought that was an overreaction.
See, I think that she saw the writing on the wall and kind of knew that, okay, well, next week is probably a female elimination, and they're all just going to try to get me out anyway, so I might as well take it into my own hands and eliminate myself. That's what I think she was really doing.
I think you're right, but I also think that, you get paid per episode. Mm-hmm. Hang on for another episode, get some money, and then you lose, and hey, maybe you won't lose.
True.
Right? Maybe you take one of them out. Who knows? Maybe someone else will do something and everyone will hate that person. I don't know. I just think the heat would have been dead after that. Go have a talk with Natalie, apologize, talk to the other girls, hash it out.
Yeah.
Go earn some money.
I think she kind of felt alone. I think she kind of felt like all the girls were against her, right? And she probably didn't want to live within that. You know what I mean? She didn't want to she didn't want to stay in the house. Maybe even outside of the game aspect on its own. Nelson's not really feeling her anymore. Johnny Bananas is gone, right? And all the girls are kind of going to be giving her side eye the entire time. I think that might have been the issue. But the other thing I think we should talk about too that I thought was kind of interesting, John, was TJ.
Yep.
Right? Like, what did you make of the whole TJ giving the stern, like, this is unacceptable, we don't tolerate bullying. Next time that happens, you guys are done. And even, like, you know, came down on Kailah a bit. Like, what did you think of that? Because I have a very hard take on this.
I think that part of what's going on is that the producers took a lot of heat for how they have handled previous incidents. Like, the number one thing that comes up is Camilla going at Leroy. Mm-hmm. So I think now TJ, as the very public face of production, was told, hey, TJ, you got to make it clear that we can't, like, be having this kind of behavior.
Yeah. Yeah. And also, especially once they know that, okay, people are talking about this as being bullying, people might perceive this as bullying, they're kind of getting ahead of what the narrative would be when the episode airs, right? So they say, okay, when this episode airs, people might be talking about this in terms of bullying, so let's get ahead of that and make it seem like we do not tolerate any of this. Despite the fact that we're showing this on a television show that is clearly edited, and if we really felt that bad about it, we could just edit these scenes out, but we won't because it's very good entertainment, and it's why the majority of these people watch the show, right? So It's very funny on that hand, but I get it and I understand it, and it's very smart by production as well. It's such a smart move, right? Because you have to give that opinion as if, like, this is not something that we'll tolerate. This is something that is not cool. They even ran, like, I don't know if it's PSA is the right term after, but going to break at one point, they ran something saying, bullying is unacceptable, and if you are feeling bullied, contact blah, 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 blah. Or check out this website. Do you know what I mean? They ran one of those things, which to me, you're covering your bases, right? But I think that the real heads, for lack of a better term, when you watch a show, you know what you're watching, right? Like there's an understanding of what you're watching. Just like I think that when you go on the show, you kind of know what you're getting into, right? Like you're getting into a house filled with crazy people, for lack of a better term. Right, and I'm using the TV quotations, crazy, right? Again, I'm covering myself now. Listen to me, right? Listen to me covering myself now. I don't mean crazy, you know, blah, 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 blah. But you know what I'm trying to say, right? Like, I think that there is some understanding, like, this isn't real life. It's a television show with fake situations and people stuck in a house for way too long with nothing to distract them except alcohol, except each other, and situations are going to happen because that's the nature of the television show. That's part of the experiment. So I think everybody involved, viewers, producers, the people on the show, have an understanding of what they're getting into and what could be happening. So, yeah, to cover themselves, producers are doing a good job, and having TJ be that stern voice. Kailah, what were you thinking, you know?
Yeah, I agree with everything you just said. We should probably wrap it up, though.
Yes.
Yes. You can get me on Twitter at JChidleyHill. It's covering the Raptors this week.
Yeah.
So some basketball talk on my Twitter feed for those interested.
Big game on Friday against the Rockets. Big game.
Huge game. Two long win streaks at stake.
Yeah. And you can find me on Twitter at Shell Alexander and on Instagram at Sheldon Alexander.
And until next week, this was You Killed It.
You killed it.